Hi guys, and welcome back to day 22 of Inktober. So today I wanted to do one that was a little bit more simple and low-key than yesterday. I loved working on yesterday's piece, but it ended up being a lot more time consuming than I intended at first, and I really enjoyed that, and I definitely want to do something that's a lot more complicated and elaborate for tomorrow. I'm really excited about some of the ideas I was thinking about, but I wanted to give myself a day where I could just kind of do a more relaxing piece, one that wasn't so complicated and time consuming, and I could do one that I could just enjoy the process and enjoy what I was putting down. And for that reason, I decided to do it in ballpoint pen, and I did it on my Canson XL watercolor paper. And actually, I'm almost out of the Canson watercolor paper, which is really exciting because it means that I can try a new brand, and I'm really looking forward to testing out a new one because there might be one that's way better for that. And I do like having that like lower tier, really affordable, nice and cheap watercolor paper that I cannot feel nervous about just putting marks down. So if any of you guys have any suggestions for a watercolor brand that you guys like that's pretty affordable, I would love to hear it because I'm going out probably tomorrow to get more watercolor paper. But yeah, so I was finishing up with this pad of watercolor paper, and I decided to do just more of a simple portrait of this girl. And as I was kind of sketching her out, I started adding more skull details, and I love doing skulls on faces. And it's just really, it's not like a unique or special idea, but it is one that I really like doing, and I bring that motif into a lot of my pieces. So that was one that just kind of started flowing, and I was working on her. And when I was starting to transfer onto the paper itself, I decided that I wanted to put her more at a Dutch angle, so it was tilted and she was shifting back, and I liked that that was a lot more dynamic than simply the straight-on portrait. And I think that I definitely like to do more of that in the future, where I play with how it's interacting with the frame and the composition itself. But when I was sketching this out, I jumped off from just a pretty typical portrait of a girl, and she had bangs, and strangely enough, I've like never really drawn bangs before. I think I've tried it kind of recently, and it didn't really turn out well. I don't think I've really figured out how like bangs actually function and how to draw it in the way that I want it to. So I at first sketched it out, and then I didn't really like how it looked, and then I started to edit that out and give her not bangs. But then I decided no, I wanted to challenge myself and see if I could figure out how to draw this very slightly different hairstyle. It's not a huge change, but it's one that I'd never really analyzed how to actually get right. And I'm actually really happy with this. It fixed a lot of the issues that I've had before in the past, where I wasn't really sure how to like frame the face with the hair, and I wasn't sure how to make it overlap with the rest of the hair in the correct way. So I think that this one was definitely a step in the right direction as far as figuring out the anatomy of bangs and how it meshes with the rest of the hair. So I'm kind of excited about doing more bangs and figuring out better hairstyles that I can incorporate different cuts like this, where it has a different shape to it than what I'm typically used to. But it was kind of nice when I was working on the light box, because when I'm working through the light box, I have to have it really dark around me so that I can actually see the light and then see the sketch coming through. So it's sometimes kind of hard to see the sketch on top of it for me. But I actually have this huge, super bright light that I have that shines on my workspace, so you guys can actually see what I'm drawing and what's going on. But it's convenient because I can just sit there and sketch on top of them, or do the line work on top of the paper, and then flip that light on, and then immediately I can see just the line work and just the paper, and I don't see the light coming through the light box anymore, and I can make sure that that image is working on its own. And that's kind of a similar thing to my digital stuff, is that I need to be sure that the line work is standing alone and it looks good on its own. And that's one thing that I'm trying to make sure that I'm really switching between when I'm using the light box, that I turn it off every once in a while so that I can look at the sketch and make sure, or look at the line work and make sure that it's actually working the way that I want it to, and make corrections and changes and fix things. And then I can turn the light box back on and then start adding to it. So it's really a big process between just going from looking at the sketch and looking at the final product and making sure that that's translating over into what I want it to look like. And before I even started working on this piece, when I knew that I wanted to do ballpoint pen and ink wash, I had already tested out whether ballpoint pen would stand up to ink wash because I wasn't sure, and it would be really sad to do a piece and then start putting water on top of it and seeing that it was bleeding. So I would definitely suggest, if you guys are going to use a new line work tool, try water on top of it. Make sure it doesn't smear. But this ballpoint pen worked really great. I was actually really happy with it. I wasn't sure that it would, but it did. And I like the idea of being able to incorporate more of these hatched in shadow areas that's in the line work, but also have these ink washes that redefine that darkness and add to it. I really like the idea of that effect of being able to just go in and darken these shadows that was already defined and in there and in the line work. I really love finding ways to marry the two together, the value and the line work. I think that that's just something that I really enjoy, finding ways to like show the planes of the face and emphasize a little bit of the edges so that when I'm going in and adding the value, it just follows the line work a little bit. Even when it's not like strictly drawn in, there's like these hints that lead to where it's actually going, and you can almost see more of a shape and the flat planes where the light is hitting. So that's definitely something that I've been enjoying finding a way to bring together, is this hatching shadow as well as the actual ink wash shadow. But as I was finished with this piece and I was looking at it and I was starting to edit and I was seeing some of these earlier stages that I had this piece in, I started feeling a little bit like I had gone too far. Like I should have listened to myself, and I always try to tell myself less is more, less is more. And for this one, I think that I did take it past the point where I think it looked best, specifically in her face, because I think I went in with a few too many different shadows that just kind of ended up making her look a little mottled, and it didn't have that same value factor that I wanted, where I wanted her skin to pop out. And actually what I ended up doing, I had a little bit of a solution for, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work. So this was a little bit of like a leap of faith experiment. But what you can do, and what I have done before in the past with Arch's watercolor paper, which is much thicker and just a lot more durable, but what you can do is you can take it and just run it right under the water, and you can rinse out ink washes that you put down, or watercolor washes that are just not quite right, and you can kind of erase from your watercolor pieces and your ink wash pieces. So I've done this before in the past, and it was actually pretty successful, but I wasn't sure how the Canson paper would take it, since it's so soft and just, it's not super great paper. So I wasn't sure if it was just gonna like almost shred it, and it already had a lot of layers on top of it, but it actually handled it really well. I was so happy with it because I didn't notice any issues with it. I just took it under the water and very, very gently rubbed at the ink so that it would just start to release that top layer of it. And I did want to be extremely gentle so that I didn't get any of that like piling little dotty texture on the watercolor paper. I wanted to make sure that I treated it as gently as possible, but I kind of got as much of the ink off as I could all over the piece, and then I sandwiched it between a towel and made sure that I just blotted off as much of the extra water as I could, and then I very lightly taped it down to my workspace and took the heat gun and just blasted it until it was all dry, so it's completely flat. And if you want to do this method, you don't have to have a heat gun. You can always just put it under between like a towel or paper towels and put something flat on top of it and let it dry overnight, and you'll have a nice flat piece again, and it'll have a rinsed off look to it. But yeah, I was really happy with the outcome. It was not a drastic difference, but it was just enough to bring it from something that I was kind of iffy about into something that I was really happy with again, which was exciting to redeem this piece a little bit more. Basically, it just lifted some of the values on her face so that it was lighter and it shone through a little bit more, and it wasn't so distractingly textured. And it also, in the areas where I went in with the really dark ink, where it was almost just black, it gave it this really beautiful texture. It lightened it about a value, and it just had this like little dotty texture to it, kind of like the textures that I like using in my digital stuff, which is based on stuff like this. But it just blended in a lot better with the other ink washes and with the ballpoint pen. And in the end, I feel like that made all the difference between me liking it and not really liking it. Also, a very small different thing that I did in this one is normally for pieces this small, I like to use only half of the width of the drafter's tape that I use, so that I have as much of the ratio of the inside of the watercolor piece as I can for the actual painting. I think that the ratio just makes more sense as opposed to when you're working bigger and you can use the full width. But this time I decided that I wanted to use the full width on this smaller size, and I really like how thick the water or the white border is for this piece. I think that it really makes it pop. I like the dynamic look of it, and I think that this is one that I'm excited to try in even smaller pieces in the sizes like this that I like to work in. These are the ones where I usually half the masking tape, and I really like to try it with the full width, and I think that that would look pretty cool, especially if I use it in effect where I overlap it over where I might have bordered off some areas. So I think that's another thing that I really want to try in Inktober, is have kind of a layering effect where I have maybe the back wash is much farther in and then some elements break that border. So it's definitely getting me thinking about new ways that I'd like to border out my piece and really just incorporate it with that kind of an element to it. But that is everything for today's Inktober. I feel a lot more rejuvenated after working on her and having just an enjoyable time working on it for tomorrow, because I know that tomorrow I want to do something a lot more complex, and I feel ready to tackle that and ready to jump in and be more creative and exciting and do more pieces like what I have done. And it's just fun to have days where it's just really gentle, low-key drawing and enjoying the process. But yeah, as usual, she is available at my shop, so if you're interested in purchasing the original and having her for your very own, she is available. There's a button right in the very bottom corner of this video where you can check that out. I'll also have a link down in the description, but yeah, so there will be this original as well as prints and buttons and lots of other goodies. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for my next Inktober.